You're listening to the Platte River Bard. The Marriage of Figaro is one of the most loved operas among opera-goers and also opera performers. It is considered to be one of the greatest operas ever written. And in 2017, BBC News magazine surveyed 172 opera singers for the opera they felt was their favorite opera, and The Marriage of Figaro was #1 out of the 20 top operas identified.
The original play was written by Pierre Beaumarchais in 1778, and The Marriage of Figaro is the second in a trilogy, preceded by The Barber of Seville and followed by The Guilty Mother. The plot of The Marriage of Figaro is about two servants, Figaro and Susanna, deeply in love and trying to get married despite the attempts of Count Almaviva, their employer, to seduce Susanna. In addition to many other plots within the story, the Count and Countess are an integral part of the plot.
We were lucky to have met with Mary Feminear, who plays the Countess, and Michael Adams, who plays the Count, and had an enjoyable conversation about their part in this opera and their career in opera. Both of these young professionals have studied and performed far and wide, with impressive bios and resumes, and yet they were so down to earth and a pleasure to talk to that we hope to get to speak to them again.
Hello, and welcome to the Platte River Bard. This is Chris Berger.
And I'm Sherry Berger.
And we are here down at the Hot Shops. Once again, they've had us down here at the Hot Shops. Thank you very much. And we are here with Michael Adams and Mary Feminear. They are the Count and Countess, respectively, in the Marriage of Figaro down at Opera Omaha. Thank you two very much for joining us and talking with us today.
Of course. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you. This is exciting.
Yes, indeed.
And I'm excited for Marriage of Figaro because this is kind of one of the basics of opera. And it's really one of the things that if you want to get into opera, it's a really good one to start with.
Oh, yeah. It's a great gateway drug, and it's,
Yes.
it's funny. It's wonderful music. You know, there's tunes that everyone has probably heard in their life, whether they realize it or not. So it sticks with you. You'll definitely leave the theater humming something.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. No, I think, and I always say this, and I'm going to say it again, but as with a lot of people of my generation, which is Gen X, our first exposure to opera was Bugs Bunny.
Absolutely.
And I think this was one of them. Figaro was in there somewhere.
Oh, I'm sure.
And sort of developed a love for certain opera pieces early on because it's connected with fun and stuff we like, and also it's Mozart.
Absolutely.
So,
do you remember the operatic whale? There's also a cartoon about an operatic whale, which you should look into.
I didn't know about that.
He's fabulous. He's a very deep voice, and it's a famous singer who does the singing. That
He
we
sings
looked
the
into.
Largo al Factotum from Barber of Seville, different show, but the same characters and whatnot. It's the Figaro.
Is it the same characters from? I didn't realize that.
It is,
I
yes.
didn't know that.
Right. So this show, Marriage of Figaro, it takes place, is that right? 4 years after the Barber of Seville. And so it's their lives and the same characters, but some stuff has gone down in the interim. So, which we all know of the last 3 years, how much can change.
Yes, indeed. Everything.
Well, because The Marriage of Figaro used to be a play, so does that mean that there was a... I guess I haven't investigated.
So was Barber of Seville
Seville.
play first?
Was that...
Yes. So
It
that's
was.
the story of Rosina, their initial love story where they meet. The Count and Countess are characters, and in the current opera that we're doing, their relationship has kind of gone through it, and they're trying to reestablish the Countess is trying to reestablish their connection that they had in the beginning in that other play. There's a lot that has happened.
Yeah. How did that go, being the Count? Now, I know that the Count is very amorous, so...
That's a very nice way to put it.
He's so polite, baby.
I mean, how does that go?
You're not going to offend me. You go for it.
just in this time. I mean, he was a man of his time. So how do you feel about playing a man of his time that feels so entitled?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't have a problem with it because the more that you can bring that out, he's the bad guy. And so I think you really have license to really flesh that out because people are not supposed to like him, or at least this is just my personal opinion. Not every director has this opinion, but I think he has to be humanist, and there have to be parts of his personality that people can access. That way, he just doesn't make any sense at all. And for my personal opinion, it doesn't make sense if the Countess fell in love with him. There had to be something appealing about him, you know.
Right.
Yeah, she sounds like something.
Oh yeah, so I think he just gets lost in his abuse of power. You know, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so I think it's kind of one of those situations. And the whole, you know, this was written, I think the De Ponte, actually, the librettist, it was during the French Revolution, right, or right before. So the whole plot is toying with this idea of class struggle, and he is really just the kind of the pinnacle representative of that. This dynamic between he and Figaro.
The servants are getting a little big for their britches, sort of, and they're trying to maybe refusing to do things or thinking that they can run.
They're just
things
trying to get married.
Right, they're just trying to live their lives.
Yeah,
exactly.
But they have some tricks up their sleeve, for sure, which we don't want to give away too much for the opera.
Sure.
But you'll see that Susanna is extremely smart, and I kind of view her as the one running the show, but she and Figaro have their own agenda, for sure. And and she and Susanna and Countess are good friends, which I think is really lovely.
Yeah,
There's a friendship, they're working together. And actually, back to the Count being a bad guy, he has a heart. So the most beautiful point in the opera is when he asks for her forgiveness. But again, not to give away too much, but it's one of the most beautiful moments in music, and it shows that glimmer of who he was. I think for sure.
That's great.
And what she fell in love with, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yes, and you just melt.
And her capacity that she's able to forgive him, knowing all that he's done and all the torment that he is inflicted upon all the characters, literally every character in the show. It's pretty rough. But back to your question, I don't have a problem portraying him as just a bad dude, because that's the whole point, right?
Bad guys are fun to play.
Well,
Can
you know,
be fun to play.
Especially if they get theirs at the end. If they get their comeuppance at the end, it almost gives you license to push even harder, because you know at the end everybody's going to get that satisfaction of, ha! He got his.
Oh, yeah.
That jerk.
Sometimes if you do it right, if you're really bad enough, you'll just get booed at the end of the night. And that's often, sometimes it's
kind of fun.
But you know you've done your job if they really don't.
That's music to my ears. I love that.
So if you come to the show, just boo me. It's fine.
Oh, yes.
Well, you know, something we didn't mention at the beginning of the podcast is you two are married in real life as well.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Just not on stage. So how did you guys get into, I mean, you're younger than us, so I think it's wonderful to have young people in opera. So how did you get interested in opera, and how did you get to do this together? Is this the only project? Like, I have so many questions.
Of course. Well, I guess we met back in, I don't remember how many years ago, but it was in a show. We did not immediately start dating until after that at some point, but we did sing a Don Giovanni once we were together. And now this show, is this the third one, or have we done more?
It's the third or fourth, I can't remember.
But so, yeah, we enjoy spending all our time outside rehearsals together and in rehearsals, so we're really thankful for that. We get along, and actually puts me really at ease to have Michael in the room. He's just a very calming presence, and I feel like I do better work when he's around.
Oh,
so.
that's great.
Yeah.
And get to travel together.
Yeah, we met at the end of 2016 doing a La Boheme in Geneva, Switzerland.
Oh.
And I was singing Marcello, and she was the love interest, Musetta. And neither of us really believe in what, colloquially the singers call show romances, where you get involved with someone in the cast, because we're only in town for 2 months at a time, and chances are you never see each other again for, at best years, if not ever again.
Sure.
And so, but this was different. I thought, oh man, she's a weirdo just like me, and I could be myself, and so we just couldn't help it. And but what's actually funny is, so that was in Geneva, Switzerland, and they hired us both back strictly because of our chemistry. They didn't know we were together at that point.
Nice.
To do in Don Giovanni, she played Zerlina, and I was the spouse, Mazzetto, the fiance, and so that was really funny that obviously
knew.
something was transcending the stage,
Yeah.
you know.
Yes.
It was kismet.
That's right. That's right.
Is Geneva as clean as Luzerne? I went to Luzerne once, and I swear it's like, did they know we were coming and they cleaned up special?
Spotless.
Gorgeous.
It was like the first thing I noticed. Okay, it wasn't me. All right. It's
Oh,
like the
just-
cleanest
Lucerne is
country on
beautiful.
earth.
Oh my gosh, Lucerne is stunning.
It was a postcard.
Yeah, just
It
yeah,
was
exactly.
a postcard. It
Yeah.
was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Geneva's lovely too.
Okay. All right. Geneva the same.
I
All right.
did a lot of hiking when I was there, so
Did you?
I love the outdoors, and that was my big thing. Is every weekend I made myself go and see something new and go out to the mountains and
Cool.
Just I love nature, so that was a really fun time in our
See,
lives.
and that's neat because a lot of times when you get to travel, you don't always get the opportunity. It's like, gosh, I've been all these places and I haven't seen a darn thing.
Yeah, you see it from the hotel walls.
True.
Yeah.
True. And Michael used to be more of a workaholic, so I really kind of pushed him to get out more and see the sights, and
Gotta do it.
that
Take
was
advantage.
that was good.
My life is much more balanced in terms of that. I actually eat salads now. It's
Yeah,
nice.
you
There's a
eat
lot
green
of
stuff.
You.
I'm definitely going to live longer. That's for sure. I mean, married men live longer. I'm pretty sure
I
that's a
think
study,
that's a
right?
fact.
Yes, it is.
Probably.
So
I'll go with that.
Surprisingly enough. But you're from Texas, so you're used to Texas barbecue, and so that is a
Beef.
leap for the salad then.
Oh, for sure. I mean, for me, actually, oddly, it was Mexican food, Tex-Mex. That
I
was
love
the big deal
Tex-Mex.
then. Yeah. So every Sunday after church, we would just stuff our faces, and that was, 20 years of my life, or honestly, still is sometimes.
Yeah, we
'cause-
eat a lot of Tex-Mex.
Yeah.
Wrong
now
with
that we
that,
live there.
but it's,
Yes.
oh man.
Well, you don't have an accent either, so I wouldn't have guessed.
It comes out when I go home and I'm around my family.
I see.
Does it
But
slip out?
when
Yeah.
you're singing, you're all so conscious of accents and different languages and dialects and stuff. And so oddly, when I started
sure.
singing, that kind of just went away. I don't.
Interesting.
Yeah,
You became international.
There's
That's
something.
cool.
I don't know.
guess so. I used to have an accent. I still say y'all. So
Oh yeah.
It all
You
comes
still
out.
see, can't get rid of y'all?
Can't
That's
get rid
all
of
right.
y'all. It's just easier to say.
Yeah.
Saves
One
time.
word.
So where are you from originally?
From Auburn, Alabama, which is a college town. So if you're
Oh.
into football, I have to say War Eagle.
Right.
I have to make that very clear.
Well, that's even more of an accent than Texas.
It's
so
a beautiful
you
drawl.
Also, yeah.
Draw.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh, okay.
Not far at all.
So what got you interested in opera? How did this all start for
How'd you
each of
fall
you?
into opera, man?
Well, for me, oddly, I played, well, not odd, but I was a sports guy growing up. I had two musical parents. My mom plays flute in the Fort Worth Symphony and has my whole life, 30 plus years.
Cool.
And my father was a bass baritone, actually, and I heard him singing my whole life, but I kind of lived in his shadow. I didn't really want to get involved, because I didn't think I'd live up to it or whatever,
Sure,
So I did
sure.
sports, and long story short, I got in a skiing accident and blew out everything, all my joints. Woke up in the hospital kind of thing, and so just to pay for school, I thought, I knew I could hear pitch, and I knew I probably could sing something in the choir at least, and so
Sure.
the Texas choir scene, or general music education, is very robust. And so anyways,
it?
I
Okay.
got a scholarship to TCU in Fort Worth, my hometown.
Oh.
And so I just studied singing, and in my mind, I thought I'd just do it for a little bit till I figure out what I really want to do,
Yeah.
But doors just started opening, and one thing led to another, and I just kind of applied the discipline that you would in sports, mastering all the different elements that goes into your game and the physique and
Sure.
conditioning and all this and that to music.
Yeah.
And it's really pretty the same. Singing appears to be this magical, just God-given thing, but there's actually a tremendous amount of coordination involved.
It's a lot of work,
it's a
especially
lot
for
of-
the type of singing you two do.
Right,
Opera is incredibly.
From the bottom of your diaphragm.
Well,
yeah.
it's incredibly
The whole body, yeah.
intensive,
Yeah.
and you have your instrument, and like you said with sports, you got to have discipline.
It's a perfect analogy. I mean, it's I know it's stereotypical, but it really is, there's unlimited parallels.
Yeah.
True.
I knew a Dr. David Yaws who had done a similar thing to you guys. He had been over in Europe for a decade and just singing opera, and he came back, he retired and got his business degree and taught business school. Okay, but he also taught acting, and we did that, and he tried to push me towards opera when I was 17, 18 years old, and I was too young to go, wow, that's a great idea. I should have, but that's okay.
I mean, hey man, what do you know at 17?
I know.
I'm 32. I feel like I still don't know anything.
But I know,
so-
but that's why I'm amazed. That's so cool that you took that leap, and because it's not your typical thing, And, I mean, especially for a guy, it's like opera. What are you talking about? Isn't that for
yeah,
other people?
Yeah, right. Yeah, no,
I think we both loved choral music. I think, that was kind of, for both of us, the way in. other than athletics, because I played tennis, and I'm just thinking,
nice.
this has got me thinking, well, I loved sports before singing, so maybe that was a big part of it.
Right.
Could be.
But the choir and choral music, which I just think is stunning and wonderful, and still love it. Yeah, and that probably for both of us was the way in. But you had parents in music, which definitely, and your sisters were both musical, so it's a special family.
Whole musical family,
Yeah, I have 13 music degrees just in our immediate family.
Oh, wow.
And so I really tried to avoid it, and I thought, no way, I'm going to go do business or engineering or something, and I just couldn't help it. So.
And I have relatives who are musicians too, so play piano, and it's definitely part of our family also. And
surrounded by
the support, like you say, if you're 17 and you think, what is this? I don't know what this is.
Yeah, and
we both had people.
Yeah,
helping
I had no
us.
one. I'm the black sheep. Yeah, I'm the weird one in my family.
That's even more interesting.
Yeah, but I'm sort of envious that you guys took that track and. Man, you got to travel and do all these great shows.
Yeah, you get to make a living
met
out
each
of
other.
it.
And
We're very fortunate and very lucky to have done any of
Really
it, and
cool.
honestly to still be doing it. I mean, in the throes of COVID, there was no live performing for 18 months, something at least.
Yeah, right around 18, a little more.
In some cases, 2 years, some companies, and it's to still be doing it on any scale, it just feels, honestly, it feels like a miracle. I wasn't entirely convinced that we'd go back.
Really?
You know,
Yeah.
So
Right.
it was
Yeah,
bad.
what happens to live performance? So I'm assuming you guys just sat at home for that whole time? Did you guys end up doing any online stuff, or?
We did a little bit here and there.
A little bit. I got into arranging and composing a little bit, and just trying other creative things. I grew
Sure.
some bonsai trees.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
I'm trying to think what.
Cool.
We had some hobbies that we Michael learned how to play golf, so that he could play with my dad, that's how they bonded, and just
Very
spent
good.
time with family as much as we could.
Yeah.
And
sure.
yeah, and just kept thinking, in a few months we're going to go back. Oh, in a few
Right.
months we're going to go back. And it was this continual
Constant teasing
waiting game.
process.
yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, it's kind of a blessing that we were teased that whole time, because if we knew we had 18 months off, or maybe I can't really remember, it's kind of a blur. We may have moved on and done something else, and so. But our contracts kept getting canceled, 2-3 months out, and so we were constantly kind of right on the edge of. That's right about the time you start preparing for a job is 3, 4, 5 months out,
Right.
and so we never really able to move on. But I'm kind of grateful personally. I'm not sure I would still be doing it if I had gone on and tasted normalcy, benefits and all the different things, and so it's I'm still,
Magic of benefits.
That's right. No, I'm just really glad to still be doing it. But it's in hindsight, it's just, man. I know everybody's got their story, but it's been wild.
Yeah.
has.
And you're a bass?
Baritone.
Baritone, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm the music one.
Hey, no, I know tenors who sound like basses, so it's
Fair enough.
yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Talking
And you
is
are
different.
soprano?
Soprano.
Soprano. The coveted soprano.
Well, I started out as a mezzo in college, and then, we're all kind of similar. Women voices are a little more similar than maybe the differences between a tenor and a bass are pretty huge
sure.
range-wise, but we're all kind of more similar. There's some women who have very low voices or very high voices, but there's more similarities. So for me, it was sort of a choice, but I think now it's kind of more obvious, but yeah.
So what happens if you guys aren't in the same opera? How does that work?
We've been lucky to have really staggered schedules, so
Good.
if I'm working, he's not, and vice versa, so we traveled a lot together.
Cool.
Good.
One time we spent 3 months apart, and that was very hard.
That would be hard. Yeah.
But we've both been pretty fully employed, and that's the thing is how do two singers make it work when you're on the road, 8 to 10 months a year.
Right.
But somehow it's the universe or something's lining up the dominoes for us. But it's been good.
Yeah.
Now, how many actual operas have you been able to do? Because I know there are not many that are actually in English. Have you been able to actually do any in English? Some people go years and years and years without singing a single word in their native language. I'm just kind of curious. It doesn't happen as often.
Yeah, the show before last that I did in the fall was Susanna, so Carlisle Floyd, which is just stunning, wonderful music in English. And It's sort of one of the famous pieces in that is sort of based on Appalachian carols. So
Okay.
I kind of grew up with some of that stuff in Alabama.
Those are
and
very soulful.
yeah, so soulful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so gorgeous.
Yeah.
And this instrument called a mandola actually accompanied that piece I was just mentioning. So that was in English, and that was a different experience. It's very nice and lovely to sing in Italian. So I really love singing in Italian.
You like Italian?
I
Your
like
favorite?
Italian, and
Yeah.
I like French.
Okay.
And English, so that was a different experience for sure.
Yeah, and that's what I hear is that it's so different because there's not a lot of English opera around that seems to get done as much as Italian, French, and even like that.
Yeah, I'd say
German.
probably about half of the standard repertoire is in Italian. And then maybe...
Is it really that much Italian?
Maybe 15-20% French, 15-20 German, there's some Russian in there. And then, there's a lot of 20th century opera like Benjamin Britten, and there's a handful of of names. But often what's done now, too, is just to make things more relatable to the audience, they'll do... the magic flute in English or something, so that people aren't having to be strapped to the surtitles to know what's good. If it's a comedy, especially, the jokes will land immediately, if it's in English. So companies are doing that more now, too. So it's not uncommon to see, to see an opera in English.
Interesting.
Titles. Yes. I actually appreciate the subtitles. And it's not because I don't think I can hear anymore, but I like to watch them.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I do too.
We're watching The Sopranos right now, and sometimes we fight over subtitles because I prefer to have them because, I'm a little slow and
I miss stuff
okay.
if I don't have. I do miss words if we don't have them turned on. But sometimes I stare at since it's in the opera, you have a little distance between what's happening on stage and then the words. But on the show, it's like there's what's his face, the main Tony Soprano, and there's the words right there, and his acting is so brilliant that I just want to focus on his face. But
that's true. And come to think of it too, opera is so suspended in time; things are really drawn out. It can take 30 seconds to get through a short sentence, So it is nice to have it.
That's true.
To read sometimes. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Now, the first opera I ever saw was I don't know whether Sweeney Todd counts. Because I think they called it an operette at the time. Excuse me. But Sweeney Todd, and of course, when Les Mis first toured, was the most amazing thing I think I ever saw, and that was sort of opera-y.
That classic, 1950s through 80s musical theater was just... some of the best music, incredible. And it really requires a legit voice, but someone with real vocal training to do. Whereas I'm not minimizing.
No, not at all.
In fact, I was about to say music theater singing is so difficult.
Oh, for sure.
It's just a different skill set, and I can't imagine belting. Oh my gosh, how hard!
Right.
So what he's saying, it calls for a classical sound maybe, and Phantom of the Opera and stuff like that. It's some of the most gorgeous music. Love it.
Well, and speaking of that, you guys, of course, concentrate on opera. Have you ever drifted to musical theater and done some just straight up musical theater stuff?
Michael has.
Yeah, a few years ago I did a showboat, which is...
Oh, cool,
Yeah. So it's, musicals, and honestly, being classically trained gives you the vocal chops, the technique to kind of do whatever you want. And so you can kind of pare it back on the classical side or tune it up, for the more operatic sound. And it gives you a lot of flexibility for sure.
Yeah. Wow.
That's cool. No, we had a girl who was, that I know that was very big into opera and very sort of classically trained and liked to sing like that. And she got cast as the Lady of the Lake in Spamalot. And it took her a few weeks to kind of get into that vibe. You could tell she was struggling to get out of that sort of classical because she's got gets a little funky in there and it's not the same. And she was, she got it and she nailed it because she's awesome. But you could see her struggling. She was like, oh man.
Totally different approach.
Completely. And you just don't think about that. It's like, well, singing is singing. Well,
it's a lot easier to go that way from more operatic singing to musical theater than the other way around. Because oftentimes in musical theater, you're mic'd. And so there are things that you don't have to worry about, like projection or things, acoustics reading 200-300 feet to the back of the house. And so that's what I think makes operatic singing so difficult, is for it to be clear for someone who's a football field away in the back of the auditorium. Whereas when you're mic'd, it's really not an issue. You can whisper and be heard.
Yeah, they might have some stage mics, and that's about all you get.
I was going to say, I thought there were stage mics. Are they?
Yeah, but they're...
Yeah.
In opera?
Do they do any kind of...
They'll do do it for like a broadcast or something, but they never pump it through the house.
Really?
And so what you're hearing in the audience is literally just our singing.
Wow.
Which is
no electronic amplification whatsoever.
Which is even more amazing. It's just even more amazing.
That's why it takes 10 years to just figure it out. Honestly, because you're essentially yelling in the healthiest way possible, so you can do it with any kind of stamina.
Healthy yelling.
Yeah, I mean seriously, that's a really poor way of putting it, but it's
that's
kind of.
That's amazing. Do you really think it took you like really 10 years to really get it and felt like you guys were rolling?
I would say so. Every day I'm learning something that feels like I'm still taking a leap, instead of baby steps. But so it's an ongoing thing, and your body changes, and your 30s are way different than your 20s for singing. So yeah, I would say 10 years to really get to know yourself and to set that baseline, that foundation for sure. And then you start learning when you're on the job sometimes. And as our friend says, it's hard to stop a wheel in motion or to teach a wheel in motion. But the job also teaches you, and then you run into challenges and you have to say, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to figure this out, and how am I going to be heard over this orchestra? And so every day is just still you're learning so much.
Do you feel you got stronger? Your voice got stronger in your 30s?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Late 20s.
Late 20s.
29 is when I noticed things getting a little easier.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it gets better?
So did I.
Yeah.
So some of that is technical. You start to just have a more streamlined idea of what you're doing, and that you don't have to do so much and without getting too far into it. But there's also an element that is physical and hormonal. So for men, and I'm not sure when it takes place for females, but your throat, your larynx, your voice box is made of cartilage.
Right.
Your whole life until you start getting into, somewhere around 30, early mid-30s, and it ossifies, it literally turns into bone, and it's a more resonant, hard surface, kind of like, if you were talking or recording, for instance, this podcast in a carpeted room, there's no feedback. Whereas if you were doing this in a bathroom, it's very live, and it's a poor analogy, but that's essentially what happens to your throat, and so it becomes a much more robust, darker, louder sound. Well, maybe not. It's maybe a little bit, but yeah, I think that's generally why there's a stereotype for people's voices changing in their 30s. The anatomy actually changes.
I did not realize that, because I did notice a change. I don't sing opera, but have sung a lot, and I did notice. I felt like I got stronger and could project. I got more of that resonance.
Well, and you quit smoking.
Well, yeah, but not in
And
my
that
30s. I
helps.
didn't. I was very bad and smoked for too long.
You guys have all the lungs. I could probably scream at the top of my lungs on stage, and nobody would hear me with an orchestra.
I
wouldn't know how to do it.
I'm always accused of being too loud.
Yeah.
That's
I know how to
amazing.
do
That's
it.
amazing. That makes total sense, too. That makes complete sense.
There's hormone receptors on your vocal cords, so hormonal changes and all of that, having a baby, all those things can change things. Some people don't notice any change, but some people notice a huge change.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a lot to contend with
That
physically.
is amazing. That is amazing. So, okay, Marriage of Figaro. This is like, I don't know whether it's the most famous one or most identifiable, but I think everybody knows Figaro. Just the word, the Figaro. I mean, everybody's like, I know that. It's like, that's opera. Have you guys had a chance to do this before, or is this your first shot at the Marriage of Figaro?
Well, you've done it a few times.
Yeah, this is both not our first production, which is nice. That's always fun to explore. Actually, the learning and exploring of the roles never really ends. You're always finding nuances and different shades of the character and the plot. And there were things the other day that I was thinking, I never really understood that until now. But it's nice to be settled and to be repeating it again, because we're not having to think about the words so much, and memory slips, and now we're just kind of and so that's
really embody, for me, just the character and delve into acting more. I did this role one time, and it was a lot of that, just trying to make sure the vocalism is. I felt invested, of course, but it's a different thing to have done it once, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Being able to revisit something, I think, is I don't know, maybe a lot of people would think, oh, well, you've already done that. Why do you want to do that again? And I think that's very exciting. It's like, no, I get another shot at this because I got ideas this time that I didn't, that I just thought of in between this time and last time. And then, of course, you'll have a new director. And they'll throw something different at you, and it's like, oh, okay, I didn't think of that before.
That's a poor analogy, but I've just been playing a lot of golf lately, and it's like people who play the same golf course over and over for years and years and years, and the weather can change, and your shots can change, or this and that, but there's enough variation within it that still makes it entertaining. And personally, I could just sing this one show the rest of my life.
Me
and
too.
Be happy.
Really?
It's
Absolutely.
Really?
This show has everything. It has so much soul and depth and great, wonderful characters, and you hear that overture, and I still get chills every time.
Aww,
just the first few notes of the overture. It's got such good energy. Mozart's the most human, one of the most. It understands the human spirit, and every note oozes that.
Wow.
I agree. Well, and funny too, and that's what a lot of people don't think of. Maybe if you go to the opera. I mean, there's like solid laughs in this thing, and like essentially slapstick.
Yeah, right.
Totally. Which you don't even think of. A lot of people don't when they think of opera. It's like, I don't see anything funny or
and to think
slapstick.
that
But yes,
something 200 years ago was still funny now.
Oh gosh.
Is,
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this show in particular, it will be very funny with our director. There's some good jokes. Really good ones. I was laughing in rehearsal yesterday watching my colleagues really laughing. So
I love that.
There's going to be a lot of that.
Do you dream in opera when you're doing this?
I think I did have a rehearsal dream yesterday.
Yeah.
Rehearsal dream?
And then it involved dogs because I talked to someone about dogs, and there were dogs in rehearsal.
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
So it was a nice dream.
There's a lot of nice
Fabulous.
dreams, and a lot of dreams that are just completely meaningless that we have, but there's also nightmares. The worst dream is that you're standing on stage and the curtain comes up for Act 2 and it's something that you don't know.
Oh.
And you're like, wait a minute, I don't know this. What am I going to do?
You're playing some music you can't identify.
Right, that's the worst case,
Oh my
but
God.
it's so
Oh, no.
funny. And then I wake up and, oh, thank God.
That is nightmarish.
So much relief. I mean,
It's like being on stage and somebody throws a line at you and you're like, oh, I don't recognize that.
yeah,
That's a
crickets.
bad feeling.
I hate that.
Yeah.
It happens, though. It's life,
does.
right? It totally does. It's totally happened to me.
And you're so guilty and you're like, is that my cue?
You just keep going.
Just go.
It's life, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So what's next? Are you taking this to another city, another opera?
Yeah,
house,
so
or-
we all have our own schedules typically. There are houses who singers will stay there and just sing. For instance, the Metropolitan Opera, there are singers who stay there and sing throughout the season. She's doing a concert in a few weeks after this one in Russian, and
I'm Russian, so I got to learn some
Oh, in
Russian.
Russian.
Oh, wow. See, Russian opera sounds terrifying.
It can be. The first time you sing in Russian, you see your life flash before your eyes a little bit.
Yeah.
I bet.
Because you're singing sounds. You're just singing random sounds that we generally know what we're saying in other languages.
Sure.
And we've studied them, but Russian was totally different. But the music is so gorgeous, so I'm willing to do anything to sing that music.
Absolutely.
But he's doing this same show after this, but totally different people, totally different
I'm going
place.
to sing another Marriage of Figaro in Madison, Wisconsin.
Cool.
And it starts like a week after this one closes.
The Marriage of Figaro will continue in many opera houses all over the country, and it shows that there is a way to make a career within opera. Though our conversation was cut short with technical problems, we hope to catch Mary and Michael again and bring more of their story to you.
The music for The Marriage of Figaro was composed in 1786 by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and the libretto was written by Lorenzo da Ponte, who turned it into a libretto in just 6 weeks.
Though we all recognize Mozart still today, we may not realize that he produced over 600 works, 21 operas, and stage works, as well as 40 symphonies and many other works, such as concerti and pieces for small ensembles and choirs. This is a staggering amount of works in just his 36 years alive. He wrote his first opera at 5 years old and his first symphony at 8 years old. The story of Mozart's life in and of itself is interesting, and he probably didn't realize what an impact he would make long after his death.
Initially, the play, The Marriage of Figaro, was banned in Vienna because it depicted servants rising up against their masters. However, De Ponte said later in his writings that it was because of sexual references. Regardless of the reasons, De Ponte removed all the political references and replaced Figaro's speech about inherited nobility with a rant about unfaithful wives. And with the exclusion of other political overtones, it was finally approved for live performances by King Louis XVI in 1784.
It premiered in Vienna in 1786 and had tremendous success, so much so that the production ran for 68 performances. This opera was also the first of 3 collaborations between Mozart and De Ponte, the other collaborations being Don Giovanni and Così fan tutte.
This opera is lighthearted and fun, and also has real appeal with its slapstick comedy. The style in which it was written is called commedia dell'arte, meaning professional comedy, which shows standard recognizable characters and plots, and adds a script with some improvisation and jokes, mixed with topical references to current Italian events. This play was similar to the style in which Saturday Night Live is to us today. The style was also one of the first models of the performing arts as being a paid profession.
This mixture of a love story, comedy, and beautiful music has created an opera that has lived on for over 200 years. Maestro Stephen White sums up The Marriage of Figaro in the Opera Omaha Study Guide so eloquently. The real reason for its enduring popularity is that Mozart, wielding one of the most divinely gifted intellects and spirits in the history of humanity, like Cupid with a bow, strikes us in the center of our hearts with his music, kindling the spark of divinity that exists in all of us, common human beings that we are.
Opera in Conversation, The Art of Comedy, Comedic Tropes and Types will be held at the Blackstone Theater March 21st at 6 p.m. And you can get your tickets to this beloved opera, The Marriage of Figaro, at ticketomaha.com. Performances are March 31st and April 2nd, and ticket prices begin at just $19. And don't miss the After the Curtain call on April 4th at the Benson Theater at 6 p.m. Thank you for listening and supporting the arts in the Platte River area and beyond. Please subscribe to our podcast so you are sure to catch all of our future episodes and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Music for this podcast was used with permission by Screaming Skull Productions. See you next time on the Platte River Bard.